Welcome to the podcast of the Public Education Foundation.
I'm Zhan Okuda-Lim with the Leadership Institute of Nevada. I'm here today with Dan McCray, who teaches negotiations and labor relations at the Cornell University School of Industrial and Labor Relations. Dan, it's great to have you here today.
Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So Dan, tell us a little bit about the work that you do at Cornell, teaching professional programs at ILR.
Right. So the ILR school is committed to studying the world of work, and I work in the Extension and Outreach Division. So I do professional programs, as you mentioned. So I don't teach undergraduates or graduate students, not an academic. I'm a practitioner. That's where I come from, labor relations and government, municipal law, education law. And so we offer programs both to unions, management, and unions and management together, and also how to negotiate collective bargaining agreements or other types of agreements, or just how to have a more collaborative relationship on the shop floor, as we might say. So that's basically what my work covers. So we have public programs in New York City, which are open to everyone, both sides. And our philosophy, we don't do union avoidance, as some, we don't teach people how to, break a union or do that. So there are consultants who do that. Our clients on the management side are people who know that they have collective bargaining relationships, know that those relationships will be there for a long time, and just want it to be more productive, want to accomplish more. Same for unions. I mean, generally unions don't want to take over the place and run it. They just want, to have their issues heard, or they want more money, or they want, and so how to make the process more productive.
Mm-hmm. And tell us a little bit more about your experience engaging in education-related bargaining and negotiations.
Yeah, so I think it's come around. So I think the top line story over the last 20 years is the decline of unions in America. Right, really 40 years is really when it started, and that continues to be the case. I think that we could talk about the Janus case, the Supreme Court case that affected union dues, which the unions were very concerned about. So we have a little experience under that. But generally speaking, collective bargaining, my point of view, and I started obviously on the management side, and now I'm a neutral. What I should have mentioned, I also do labor arbitration, mediation, stuff like that. But what I've seen is when the starting point is around 1980, when private sector became more aggressive in union avoidance techniques, they transferred a lot of the responsibility over to lawyers, to labor lawyers, because you needed to negotiate aggressively and get to impasse legally, and then use your power under the National Labor Relations Act to impose a deal or to force a strike and win a strike. And it was a very aggressive campaign. And sort of the out-of-the-box management approach is, we come in with these very competitive goals, et cetera. And I think what is happening in education in particular is teachers are finding power and voice, and those strategies aren't really working. We could talk about West Virginia, we could talk about California, but that sort of out-of-the-box, we have all the power, we're just going to be tough at the table, which is sort of how it has worked. Works that way in recessions when you need to get concessions. Everyone knows they want to save jobs, et cetera. Those types of strategies don't really work in a lot of settings, and education is one of them, in my view.
So I know with the time you're spending here working with both our Teacher Leader Academy and our Executive Leadership Academy, you go into the tension that different stakeholders might face, or different parties might face. It can either be a more competitive sort of negotiation, or, as you say, some of these more hardball sort of tactics. But you also talk about looking at ways to have a more collective or collaborative sort of negotiation to talk about different issues, right? Tell us maybe some of the trends that you've seen in your experience on employee management relations, and how different education stakeholders have played different tactics depending on the situation.
Well, so just to be clear, for the Teacher Leader Academy and Executive, we're not doing labor relations at all, right? It's using the concepts of both competitive or collaborative negotiations and what those things mean. When do you do one or the other? Can you integrate them? Can you combine them? What are the dangers of it? as it deals with your daily lives in your school, particularly for teachers, how they can get more power as teachers, not as in a union context or collective bargaining with the employer, but with their principal, with students. How do you negotiate with students? So, but to answer your question about what I've seen typically is in society, values culturally, you see it in television and movies when they show negotiations, is the power negotiator. So we start off, talking about what power in negotiations means. And if you really look at it critically instead of the sort of, again, this out of the box, I'm going to be tough, I'm going to, argue very strongly for what I want, that's a very limited view of negotiations, because if you're interdependent, if you both have power, and the alternative to doing a deal is doing nothing and no one accomplishes anything, which is typically what happens in public sector. We fight, nothing gets done, and then we just keep fighting about it for a long time. Neither side gets what they want. Then you have to shift to a different mode, right? So I use the example of boxing versus Aikido, right? So boxing is you want a strategy, you want to play to your strengths, you're anticipating the blows from the other side, you duck them, you counter punch, and da-da-da-da. That's the more competitive haggling approach. You're talking someone into your position. As opposed to something like Aikido, when you're interdependent and you're not just trying to get more money, you're trying to work problems out and you're repeat players and you want to work on another problem tomorrow and another problem tomorrow. You have to trust each other, etc. You try to embrace resistance, right? Don't fight against it. You sort of bring it in, right? And sometimes someone's upset, so you use their negative energy and you try to redirect it into something positive. That's the more collaborative approach, which is more appropriate when you need each other and you're repeat players. The power game doesn't work. It just becomes destructive.
And as you mentioned, with our leadership academies, we have teachers, administrators who have to work with each other, work with students, work with higher level management, work with families.
Exactly.
So what are some of the ideas or strategies that when you meet with our leadership academies or when you meet with others who come through your programs at Cornell, what are some strategies that you share or you ask educators to keep in mind when they engage in these negotiations with their colleagues, with students, with families, with their supervisors? Not necessarily in the union or employee management sort of sense, but just those sorts of day-to-day negotiations that happen when you need to ask to get approval for something or start something.
So it'd be the same. It's the same basic structure, no matter what setting, what context. So there are two sets of questions. One relates to your mindset, behavior, and the structure and process of the negotiation. Right? So do you have a competitive mindset with the other, and do you think the other has a competitive mindset with you? It takes two to collaborate, but one can compete just fine and be effective by taking advantage of the sharing of information and preferences and priorities that a collaborative bargaining requires. So you have to ask yourself, is the person going to compete with me? Am I going to compete with them, and why? If yes, why? Is it right that we have pure conflicts of interest? For me to win, you have to lose $1 more for me is $1 less for you, or do we have different priorities and preferences? Do we share interests? But if it's a competitive negotiation, then you have to engage in certain competitive behaviors. Anchoring, earning concessions, sort of those classic haggling skills. And you have a structure that generally supports effective haggling. If, on the other hand, as I said before, you're repeat players, power doesn't work, you have a lot of shared interests, you both want the same thing, you just have radically different views of how to get there. Well, so that's okay. That you have the same problem, you just want to solve it in different ways, that's great. That's because you're sharing the problem. Sometimes you have different problems and we'll just fix each other's problems. But when you have the same problem, that's where it could really lead, but you have to have a different mindset. We both can win. $1 more for me is not $1 less for you. For me to win, you have to lose, that type of thing.
Doesn't always have to be a zero.
It's not zero sum. We don't perceive it as zero sum. Sometimes when it's money, it's going to be zero sum. Either the money goes here or the money goes there. Right, and someone's going to win, someone's going to lose, but we bring that mindset into places where it shouldn't be, right? And we also don't know how to convert that money. Let's double the money. Let's figure out a way to grow the pie, but that's a different thing. But so we come and we have similar goals, or we have different goals, or we're stuck with each other, right? Then we should have a different mindset, like we've just discussed. But then you also have to follow it up with different behaviors, because then we can come back. Either we're competitive. I need to prove my point. I'm not letting you talk. I'm trying to dominate the discussion. That's one set of things. Or even less competitively, people who are very task-oriented. If we're trying to be collaborative, I may be totally intentionally collaborative. I'm changing my behavior. I changed my mindset to be collaborative, but I'm so task-oriented that I want to solve problems before I've truly understood them. And I haven't given you an opportunity and given you the empathy of really exploring the problem with you, which may be all you want, really, in the end, is just to be heard. But to do that, and so if I jump, I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. Let me fix it this way. And you're like, well, no.
That's not what I was.
Yeah, and maybe I won't be able to articulate. Now, all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, he's being unreasonable. And you're thinking, oh, he doesn't really understand me. Right? So slowing, the behaviors have to be not only asking questions and sharing interests, but slowing things down. Don't make an offer. Don't, do sort of the opposite of what you would do in a competitive situation. And the structure has to change. We have to be comfortable, has to be off the record. Maybe we'll write everyone's interests on the board, right? We'll facilitate it. We'll take a break. We'll talk to ourselves. The structure of the negotiations, not when we're tired, not when we're angry.
Or hungry.
Hungry
and angry.
Or feed them. That's a great collaborative approach. Feed the other side. And you'd be surprised what buying people food does to,
Interesting. So, it's very interesting to hear that, Dan, because I think some might say that's an ideal. That sounds great if you can get different sides in the negotiation to have a similar mindset. But what about being in a situation where there might be a lack of trust, whether because of things that have happened in the past or the parties are so new, they just met and yet they have to reach an agreement? What strategies could stakeholders employ in that sort of situation if there's not as much trust as there could be?
Yeah, so the purpose of approaching it collaboratively, and I said before that one person can compete, one person can collaborate. The person that collaborates loses. I overstated the case. That's true if you just sort of blindly go in there, but you can protect yourself. You're just not going to disclose information, but signal collaborative behavior. And one way to signal collaborative behavior is not to respond, right? But you have to do that from a position of strength, right? So we're just, you don't understand because you don't know how to negotiate. You don't say this to them. But a lot of it is just they don't understand what negotiation is. They're just arguing. That's a lot of it. They just never had a class in negotiations. They just don't know how to negotiate. So they're arguing. So I might let you spin your wheels. I might let wear down. I might show you you're getting nothing done. And then, but not engage with you. If you have no power and they're just rolling over you, well, then you have to go get more power, right? So part of it is engaging in the collaborative process. If you control the meetings or you can suggest a meeting, let's not do it this way. Let's just list everyone's interests. You can be someone who's promoting collaborative bargaining by focusing on interests and trying to find, how can we fix their problem in a way that works for us, right? Without much risk to you. You can just be proposing that structure. You can't change other people's minds. You can't change other people's behavior, but you could accept a different structure. Or maybe we should facilitate this meeting. Or maybe we should do the process in a different way. That's a safe thing in many situations to ask. In other situations, you need more power because the person isn't listening to you. And you don't have anything that the person values. Or they don't value you, right? And so part of the problem I find in negotiations trainings, it's either sort of the haggling 101, or it's the academic, like, be collaborative. But sometimes you have to use power to get people to be collaborative, right? And that's why we're seeing strikes, right? In West Virginia, the superintendents wanted teachers to strike. We agree. We want them. We don't have the money either. We can't give you what you want. The legislature has to. And they walked off the job. They had the support of the superintendents, and they got more money. At a certain point, that you asked me where we're going in education. 10 years ago, teacher strikes were unheard of because it was a recession. Teachers' unions were a little back on their heels politically. Now, teacher strikes are very successful. And, they're coming to a neighborhood near you because they're dealing with, and a lot of the superintendents and administrators are like, yeah, we kind of agree we need more resources for the problems we have. We don't have it. And the only thing that's going to, and that's unfortunate, right? Because we don't like that. But power concedes nothing without a demand. And it's straight negotiation advice. If you're negotiating with someone and say, well, I don't have what you want. I can't give it to you. And you're negotiating with the wrong person. Or you need to get that person more authorization to give you what you want. And how do you do that? Power. That's the way it is.
No, in closing, I'm thinking about some of the scenarios that you take the Leadership Academy participants through. And I think one thing that comes to mind is that sometimes negotiations are very structured, they're facilitated, or in your case, you can play like a neutral arbitrator, you're in the middle. But oftentimes these sorts of strategies play out just in day-to-day conversations. Like if I'm a teacher, I have an idea for a program or a field trip, but I need approval from my principal. I might not go to my principal and say, let's sit down and have a facilitated negotiation. I just want to have a meeting with my principal to get approval for the money or for the signature that I need or for the waivers that I might need. What advice would you give to a teacher or a principal or folks who might be on each side of a negotiation when it comes to these sorts of day-to-day interactions that are part of the job of being an educator? How can different sides maximize that collaborative potential in these sorts of discussions?
Well, so I would push back against the question. It's always a question, because this is the day-to-day micro stuff where you don't have a lot of planning, right? So it may or may not be collaborative. You may use power, you may use influence, or you may negotiate. So if you have some authority, you might just be checking in with your principal, or you might be in a place where it's better to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission, and you just do it, right? 2 is you're going to influence the principal by coming in and being a good salesperson. A good haggler will come in and tell the person why what you're suggesting is in that person's interest. Oh, principal, let me tell you, we only have 5 minutes. Remember when you said it? But that's because you're prepared. You know what the principal cares about. You know how to craft a good sales pitch to get what you want. It's quick. It's influency, right? We're there to influence the person.
Yeah.
But if you don't know, and you're like, okay, the principal is going to resist me. I'm asking for something new. I'm going to ask for something. Then you have to get into the negotiation. And what you need to do, don't try to overcome the resistance or argue against it. Embrace that, find it, look for it. Use the verbal aikido to find the problem, to find the reason why the principal is going to say no. Then maybe take a break and figure out, all right, how can I fix that problem? Principal doesn't want me to do it. And 9 times out of 10, when we do this in the classes here, 9 times out of 10, when you compare the principal's interest with the teacher's interest, there's misunderstanding, and you can actually fix the principal's problem with your proposal, and then they'll let you do it. And that's the process. Not arguing, but digging deeper into the reason why for the no, embracing the no, looking for the no, trying to find the thing you don't understand about the no. Why wouldn't they agree to it? It's a brilliant idea. But no, it's the opposite. It's what, okay, they're going to say no, why? Let me find out more. And then fix that. Figure out a way to fix that to get what you want.
It's an interesting point right there. Instead of just haggling or arguing all the time, figure out why there might be resistance, embrace that resistance. Like you said, a verbal aikido, figure it out, and then find a way to tackle that.
Exactly.
Dan, thank you so much for taking time to join us on the podcast and for being with our Leadership Academies this week.
Thanks for having me.